once you cross Series B as a company, you start becoming more corporate and the startup life kind of disappears and becomes more boring. Was this your experience when you joined Promise?
Promise is not like working at a tech company, but even for a company of like moderate size, it's very flat organizationally. My friend Varun had an API key for GPT-1, so I did get to play with it a little bit, and they're most of the time say stupid things, but you could see the potential. Someone with a really early introduction to entrepreneurship, I was kind of obsessed with Judy Faulkner, the founder. I was like, how were they able to create this institution?
How many months in or how many years in does the Acqui-Hire come into picture? Abrar, what's up, Matt?
Hi, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Welcome to the No Fixed Route podcast.
Yeah, honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. You're the first non-founder that I have on the podcast, but you have an interesting story. We'll get into it. You are a former founder, but before we get into all that, I want to know the history of how you got into AI. You started doing AI before it got hot, before the ChatGPT moment in 2022. Take me back. What were you doing in like 2016, 2017?
Yeah, great question. So I was in high school. So, really the only person I have to thank for how early I got my start is my father. My father did his PhD in OCR, so computer vision, back in the 1990s. So had a little bit of a family history obsession with AI. So when I was in high school, I got a gig at the University of Arizona. I was doing research papers for them. And I got a couple papers out. So we're talking like mostly NLP applications for healthcare. And so I was basically doing sentiment analysis for doctor-patient interactions and, working with really early version of a medical scribe. And that was my first research paper. And that's how I got my start in AI.
Close to 2019 or 2020, when the very early OpenAI APIs came out, did you get access? Were you aware what was going on? What was like your first reaction?
Yeah, my friend Varun had an API key for GPT-1. So I did get to play with it a little bit. And I thought this was like neat, right? At that point, it could make like not even a short story, maybe like a couple sentences or so, but it was at least like coherent, and it would occasionally, or rather most of the time, say stupid things, but you could see the potential. I don't think I foresaw like the exponential growth. Like I grew up on Star Trek, and in Star Trek, they invent artificial intelligence in the 23rd century, right? I think I was like, this is cool. I don't know if this is going to change the world or not, but it certainly beat the old school NLP tools that I was using.
Yeah. I think today, a lot of the models, they're great. There's some workflows that we implement in our company, for example, that aren't quite perfect yet. And we're exposing them to our patients, to our customers. And sometimes they break. One attitude is, this thing isn't working, let's scrap it out. The exact opposite is saying it's bad. We're just going to, stick with it. And we're going to assume it's going to get better in 6 months, in a year. Let the users suffer until then. I think customers are okay with hallucinations and things, going wrong with AI now. So, that's kind of nice. But back in the day, if it wasn't working towards what you wanted it to do, you just like scrap it and dismiss it. Was that your experience?
Yeah, I think people were familiar with the idea of straight through processes being automated, right? But the idea of the lack of determinism, the inherent stochastic nature of these models was something that no one was really familiar with, right? You have a classifier, it's going to classify the same input data the same way every single time. That's what machine learning was for the last 20 years, right? And suddenly we have these generative models and you tell it something twice, it gives you two different answers. I think there was a big cultural change, not only for customers. I think for customers, like, in healthcare, there's a level of randomness that's simply not acceptable, like a level of risk tolerance. And I think that's why healthcare has been slower to adopt AI. But with other industries, it's fine, right? It works well enough most of the time.
Yeah.
Then I think there's also an attitude change on the part of the developer, right? Like you have to get used to the idea of building in guardrails, kind of coaching it and putting it into a pen like a wild animal. And that's something that felt very unnatural for most engineers, I think, 5 years ago.
That makes sense. Okay. So fast forward, you go to Berkeley for school. Do you continue doing your AI research at Berkeley, or were you just a regular student?
Yes and no. So I was still affiliated with that lab at Arizona for a couple of years, kind of wrapping up that project that I had worked on, getting a couple of successor papers out. I Also got involved in the research scene at Berkeley. I wasn't, by any means the top of the top. I wasn't at Bear or anything like that, but I had a crypto phase, as many people did back in 2021, 22. Put out a couple of papers on different, basically derivatives protocols for tokens. That was pretty fun side quest. I did some NLP work for Haas, the business school, helping. You're gonna chuckle. On my resume, I listed it as gray market agriculture. Really, we were researching cannabis markets and seeing how different state regulations affected the way that we would see marketing materials in cannabis in those different states. So I got to do a little bit more NLP there. And yeah, and on the side, in my internships, I was fairly typical. I was at Tesla for a summer on their supply chain team. Amazon, that was more of a researchy play. I wasn't on AWS. I was on the consumer side, but on a team called Product Semantics. So you know how when you go to Amazon, it tells you your recommended next purchases. People also buy. That was the team behind that. They don't exist anymore. They kind of got split up into a few different teams, but it was basically me as an intern and a bunch of PhDs from Tsinghua University. I think me and the other intern were the only ones who didn't speak Mandarin. But yeah, it was a cool team. I was there for a summer, and then coming out of college, when I started at Epic, that's when I got back, I guess, going back all in on natural language processing, because when I started at Epic, the world was still on GPT-2.
Hold on, let's talk about Epic a little bit. You grew up in the Bay. You went to college in the Bay, and for some reason, instead of working at a company in the Bay, you decide to go somewhere in Middle America and work for Epic. How did that decision come about?
Yeah, I literally have a LinkedIn post about this. People ask me this all the time. What the hell were you thinking, bro? Right?
And where's Epic for the viewers?
Yeah, for the viewers, Epic is in beautiful Verona, Wisconsin, a suburb of Madison. Madison's the state capital. Metro area's got about 750K. It's also where the University of Wisconsin is. Go Badgers. I wasn't a student, but I went to a few football games. But yeah, nothing much to do in the broader area except beer and cheese. But it's an interesting city because it's fairly liberal and well-educated. It's the fittest city in America. A lot of bike trails. Feels like a cross between Europe and the Midwest sometimes, but brutal winters. So thinking there was pretty simple. When I was at Arizona, way back in high school, the corpus of data that we were analyzing was from an Epic system. And during a couple of my internships before the big tech ones, we were also working with Epic data. And my mom's a medical assistant. So she is the person typing in your information into the chart before you see the doctor. And so she works in the Bay, and she's been doing that for almost 15 years now. So I was familiar with what a monolith Epic was, what a near monopoly this is, right? For a very long time. So someone with a really early introduction to entrepreneurship, I was kind of obsessed with Judy Faulkner, the founder. I was like, how were they able to create this institution, this central player in the market in the middle of nowhere? How did this happen? What are they doing different that, what's the perspective there that was able to win where thousands and thousands of venture-backed companies failed? That was a big part of the motivation is, it's simply known how big of a deal they were. And also, I, at that point I had lived in the Bay my whole life. I'd interned in New York. I like New York, but I didn't like getting taxed by the city. I was like, I want to try something new. I want to touch grass. I want to see how the rest of the country operates. And it was interesting, right? In the Bay Area, I'm considered fairly moderate, and there people thought I was a radical leftist, right? But yeah, it was a pretty interesting transition. When I started at Epic, it was February, so I moved in January, right in the middle of a polar vortex. Temperatures hit minus 20 Fahrenheit. Pretty nuts.
How long did you stay there?
Around a year.
Very short time. Did you know what you were going to do afterwards, or did you quit and say, I'll figure it out?
I had another job offer by the time I left. I think when I started at Epic, I didn't go in with the intent of this is going to be a short stint. What ended up happening is that I spent a short stint there, and I was able to learn what made them different, the culture, the stack. I was able to figure out why Epic won. And
why was that, by the way?
I think customer obsession is a big part of it. I mean, that sounds like a cliche, but Epic has been doing forward deployed engineering for the last 40 years before Palantir made it a term. The level of integration with and support for building custom workflows is incredible. Other thing that you realize is that Epic is not like as a software developer at Epic, you're not building shiny end-to-end polished workflows. What you build are a series of feature flags. So there's an entire team of implementers, which are about a third of the company, that actually end up configuring the Epic software to be exactly what the customer needs for every single role at the hospital. So it's incredibly configurable. And, that's kind of the blessing and the curse. That's why, it feels very heavy and onerous out the box, and it's not pretty, but that's because it has a lot of configurability built in. And then I think finally, it's the CEO, Judy Faulkner's willingness to say no to a lot of customer requests. They've only lost one customer ever, and they actually got them back the following quarter. And a lot of that comes from not building what the customer wants right away, but just going like, maybe you're not ready for that. And their strategy is pretty, if you have investor friends, they'll tell you what Epic tends to do is they'll wait out any new innovations in the market a year or two. They'll see what gets funded. They'll see what gains traction. And then because they already have the built-in distribution advantage, they'll simply give it out for free or reduced cost to all of the customers that they already have. And then they crush whatever happened. Yeah. Like famously, Abridge, big AI scribe company, a couple of years ago, raised a crazy Series C round. I worked at a scribe company at one point. This is a cool category. It's the first obvious application of AI for clinicians, but like it's a race to the bottom, right? Like the inference is going to get cheaper. The models are going to get better. And like, I don't really see this as being this huge growth category the way that investors were.
So there are a lot of companies building AI tools for hospital systems. Do any of them have any chance of succeeding?
I think the smartest play that I've seen be successful tends to be to avoid Epic's turf. So for example, I used to work at Freed after Epic. That was the job that I took in the Bay immediately following that role. And at Freed, they build AI scribes. They're backed by Sequoia. They're doing fairly well for themselves. Shout out Erez Druk, the CEO. I really liked him. But they tend to go for smaller practices, the ones that Epic wouldn't serve. And that's why they've been able to succeed with product-led growth in a market which is traditionally dominated by, more traditional enterprise B2B play. They didn't have that sales motion at all, and they don't touch the same customers as Epic does. And I think that will hopefully keep them safe for a little while. I've seen a lot of new companies basically do like, oh, we're going to build for veterinary care. We're going to build for dental practices. If you can get your initial toehold in a market where Epic isn't building, I think you have a much better shot.
And what though?
And then what? Yeah, the growth is definitely capped. So
like you just sell to Epic.
Epic doesn't tend to acquire.
Okay.
Yeah, they're very they like building things in house. The Abridge contract is a little bit of an exception because they actually took an equity stake, but it was a little bit underhanded because they built out all the custom Fire APIs that Abridge needed, and then they just used them for their own internal product. So, in general, it's a bit dangerous to get in bed with someone a lot bigger than yourself, right? So, I think there's definitely a place for non-Epic businesses. Epic really tends to avoid things like clinical decision support. Like the idea of telling a doctor what not to do or what to do, that is a amount of liability that they don't like to take on. So if you're doing something like that, you're safe. If you're in life sciences or pharmaceuticals, Epic doesn't touch that at all, right? That's really none of their business, right? And if you're on the revenue cycle side, I think there's a lot of opportunities to identify waste, fraud, and abuse in a more aggressive way than Epic system does. Epic, I mean, you got to think about incentives, right? In healthcare, you have the patient, the provider, and the payer. And all of them have different overlapping and competing incentives. But within revenue cycle, Epic works for the clinicians, they work for the hospital, and therefore, you can think of the entire system as being a glorified spreadsheet, as a way to justify line items for billing, right? It is really an invoicing system, right? Everything else is gravy on top. But so I think there's a lot of successful companies in revenue cycle and a lot that are automating it with AI. That's what my startup tried to do in part as well. So I think you just need to be cognizant about like what turf they hold and just like be smart and like don't put your initial toehold where they're already at.
That makes sense. At what point did you start your company?
I started my company after Freed, so middle of 2023.
Okay. What was it called? And give me like a 30-second overview of what it did.
Yeah, the company was called Dorsal FYI. We crowdsource medical bills to help people with price transparency. We use the bills that were uploaded to fight medical bill appeals to try to win people their money back if they were charged excessively. And we took all of the data that we aggregated and we would sell it to community health organizations and MCOs and the like.
That makes sense. I think around the same time, donotpay.com was blowing up on Twitter. Were you guys first or was Do Not Pay before you guys?
Do Not Pay beat us by about a year.
Okay.
Definitely a big point of inspiration. I met the CEO at one point.
Got it. It's a very compelling business model, right? Do not pay, I believe, started with parking tickets and like having people not get charged for it. You guys are doing that with medical bills. Walk me through how you came up with that idea. Were you like personally, charge more than you should have? Or was it more, this is an emotional topic. I think it's going to do well. Let's go after this market.
I think like I'm blessed to have been fairly healthy. So I haven't had any major procedures that would have qualified. So the inspiration actually comes from a very unexpected place. If you're a software engineer or you recruit, you've certainly heard of services like Glassdoor and levels.fyi. These websites that aggregate salary information and, provide some of it for free to the public to like get a sense of where you fit in the market. And also they have a bunch of B2B plays where they sell it to recruiters. And one of my nephew, Zahir Musa, is actually the founder of Levels FYI. He started that when I was still in high school. So that was a big point of inspiration, this idea that you can get kind of organic growth by simply finding an issue that people are passionate about where there is a lack of transparency in the data. Finding a flywheel to start generating that data while also doing some kind of good in the process, some kind of value add. And then once you have that data moat, no one can stop you.
Got it. Okay, we have 3 minutes left in this ride. We'll pause the interview for now. We'll get off, call another Zoox on the way back, and do another 20 minutes. How do you feel about Zoox, like your first AV experience?
It's nice. I don't know if you've ever seen the inside of a Rolls Royce, but they have these lights.
They got the stars on there.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. I will say it's a little strange facing someone else in a moving car. It feels more like a bus than anything else, right?
Yeah, wait until you're on this side. Like the first time I started moving backwards in a Zoox, I almost got sick.
Oh, really?
It feels a little strange. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. Suspension's kind of nice. It feels nicer than a Model 3.
Yeah, next time we'll play poker in here or something like that. Get a bunch of folks.
I'm surprised by how
driving,
drinking and driving. Open container laws.
You're surprised by?
I'm surprised by how clean it is.
I know.
Yeah.
Like, do they stop and clean it from time to time? Like,
I'm sure there's cameras set up in here. There's probably some AI system that tells them when someone leaves their bag or something like that in here.
It never smells like I've eaten food in this car. Like maybe it has excellent air circulation system that takes all scents out, but it's always
the vents are right here.
The vents are right there.
Yeah.
You get fresh air, climate control, all of that. It's honestly the best.
How many of these interviews have you done so far?
I think you're the 11th or maybe 12th recording.
Okay.
Not all of them go live now. So we were talking about, do you see a red square here, by the way? Like on the camera? Okay. The other day I forgot to click it and half of the
oh no
podcast, I wasn't on it, but it's fine. Okay. So we're talking about your company. You built it and very early on you get an acquisition / Acqui-Hire offer.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a second. What I found super interesting was who your co-founders are, like the people that were early in your company were. They weren't, 21-year-olds, college dropouts that you went into YC with. They had experience in the industry that you're in. Walk me through how those introductions happened and what it was like working with such experienced people.
Yeah, totally. So what you're alluding to is our CMO spent about 12 years at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Our CPO spent 4 years at Aetna, 4 years at Cigna. Actually, I got them mixed up. But anyway, point that you're trying to make is like these are people in their 50s, not that much technical experience, but a lot of payer side experience. So introductions happen fairly, like, I guess, word of mouth organically. I didn't go out looking for more people. I actually wonder, like, if I had gone the more conventional route of just getting another cracked young person, it would have probably been easier to fundraise, right? That's a company structure that investors can pattern match against very easily, right? And I took a risk and, it was able to get us to a bootstrap, but it ended up being harder to raise subsequent rounds.
Do you wish you had younger co-founders or did the experience really help you guys?
I think for our market, it was the right bet. Just people who had been in pairs, had seen the problems, already kind of had a Rolodex of people that they could call and work with. That was the right play. I think, it might have made sense to get another young builder who was all in. Like I might have added someone to the team, but I don't think I would have subtracted anyone.
Got it. Were they working full time?
One of them was not.
How do you get people with that much experience to say yes?
Yeah, I think if you have a sufficiently compelling background and you're able to tell a story about the company, I think people naturally want to gravitate, want to work and want to believe in something.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't that challenging. It was surprisingly easy.
I want to maybe go a level deeper. And the reason why I'm staying here is because I know a lot of people, for example, my roommates, they're in an industry where having an advisor with a lot of connections could really help you. But getting someone with experience, convincing them to join, a bunch of people in their mid-20s, working on a crazy idea is very, very difficult. So if you were speaking to a founder who's in this kind of industry, someone that needs the experience, how would you break it down? Like, where do you start? Where do you start looking? And how do you eventually convince them to leave their job?
Yeah. So I think it is very much a game of right place, right time. I think you just need to be in the right rooms. So if you're going to run into a few hundred versions of this person before you find one that is willing to drop everything. And I think, that's something that you can't grok just from looking at someone's LinkedIn profile, right? You have to just be there during a very specific moment of someone's life when they're willing to take the plunge.
Is this something you can engineer? Like, did you search for a certain profile on LinkedIn, figure out where they hang out, hire a PI? I don't know. Like, is this something that you can orchestrate, or was it just, it just happened? It's a one-off. It's not replicable, really.
I think it's absolutely replicable. Like, if you know the kind of person you're looking for, you just have to be willing to have a lot of conversations. I think the actual hire is not something that you can manufacture out of thin air. But I think identifying the profile of person, someone who, basically someone who knows all of your customers already, that's who you're looking for. And you need to be able, if you have a new compelling value proposition for that market that they haven't heard before, I think you'd be surprised at how willing people are to give things a chance. Convincing someone to go full-time, to go make that leap from being an advisor to being an operator is probably the biggest jump. And for that, it's very much a case of do you have the right candidate at the right time?
Got it.
So you might want to juggle a couple of advisors before you figure out who's willing to take on that burden.
Even to get an advisor, do you start on LinkedIn?
For me, no. For me, it was a lot of I go to healthcare meetups here in the Bay pretty often. Okay. I, went to a bunch of insurance conferences. So I was already surrounded by kind of operators, these non-technical companies that were seeing what was happening with AI and were terrified by it, right? Knowing that this thing is coming for their jobs, knowing that they need to make some kind of play to stay relevant for the next 10, 15 years. So that's what I mean when I say you got to be in the right rooms. I think that's much more important, getting that face-to-face exposure. I think hiring over LinkedIn, obviously it has been done, can be done. But for a startup where you need someone who's willing to take on that kind of risk in the earliest of phases, it's pretty challenging to reach that kind of confidence just from scouting someone online.
That makes sense. Okay. The first couple of months working with, what are their first names at least?
So Dr. Emran Rauf, Lena Miller, PharmD,
okay,
and my CTO, Sharia Rabi.
Okay. How long do you work with them before, things like work hours or full-time commitment, et cetera, started becoming an issue?
Yeah. So I started off with an NDA. Well, so Rabi and I were working on this almost from Rabi joined me about three months in, once I had kind of conviction around an idea. And Lena and Dr. Ralph joined about a year after that. So when we were, actually, no, maybe 9 months after that. So when we had kind of an MVP already built out, had a bunch of data aggregated. So we started with NDAs and kept them as advisors for a few months. And then we just kept talking about basically the upside, right? And the way it progressed from there is I wrote a second set of contracts where they weren't quite, promoted to founder or C-suite level yet, but basically with a bunch of incentives for being able to bring on new customers. Oh, you sign this much, you get this much equity. You get this many customers, you get this much equity. You get this much of a cash bonus. These kinds of things, right? And I think once they saw that all laid out in front of them, and they started to get a sense for the amount of involvement that it would take, I think they asked to be to take on a larger role.
Yeah. Got it. Okay. Do things start going sideways?
I think things never really went sideways so much as things never got off the ground with as much traction as I was hoping for.
Okay.
Levels FYI, product-led growth, organic Reddit movement, people were reposting their stuff. I think we had a hard time getting people to upload their medical bills at all. There was a lot of hesitancy. It's very much a cold start problem, right? How do you fight these bills with enough accuracy and precision when you don't have that much data? How do you get that much data? You have to start fighting people's bills and getting them to submit it. So we're chicken and the egg.
Yeah.
So, if we were to start over, right, I would have probably found someone who had a prior startup exit or something like that, someone who would be able to help me raise a crazy round right off the bat because it's just simply a very capital intensive business. But yeah, so we found it challenging to actually figure out to get the amount of traction that we wanted. We had a couple of unpaid pilots and things were progressing smoothly, but the actual path to revenue and exponential growth was looking fairly daunting.
Got it. How many months in or how many years in does the Acqui-Hire come into picture?
A little over a year and a half in.
Okay. How did that even start, those conversations?
Yeah, so I was introduced to the team at Promise. That's the company that acquired us. They're a GovTech Series B YC 2018. Anyway, so I was introduced to their team through an investor, Yusuf at AliCorp. So I had pitched Yusuf. He really liked us, and he was in the large bucket of people who was like, come back with traction. You know, I don't think I got very many explicit no's. I got a lot of, this is great. You're amazing. We want to invest in you. We don't know about the idea. We don't know, you know, you're going against some big adversaries. So come back with traction. And that's traction I was never truly able to materialize in honesty, right? But so Yusuf introduces me to Jacob Sills, who's now the CFO. He's no longer at Promise. He's the CFO of a legal AI company now, as of like a month ago. But anyway, so I was introduced to Jacob. We get to talking, and he's basically telling me, hey, you know, your company is trying to help people, you know, use their benefits the right way. Our company, we work directly with the states to get benefits to people's hands in the first place, right? Like, we have to do a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse and eligibility verification with AI. We have a need for voice agents and text agents and big data. And I think there's a lot that we have in common from a values perspective of making sure that the poorest Americans have access to in an equitable, fair system. So the first 2 or 3 conversations were very broad like that, like just sharing what we're working on, being excited about the possibilities in the market. And then eventually, you know, I get to thinking, you know, like where is this going, right? Why are we on conversation 4? What's going on, right? So then Jacob basically says, like, you know, your company is great.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through that, like how that conversation happened? Like, did you email him, or is all of this just one phone call?
A series of phone calls.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the very early phone calls, you guys were just chatting. There was no like, your investor didn't introduce you saying, hey, like you should sell your company to these guys. It was just like, connect, guys. And then 3rd, 4th conversation, do you say, hey, are you going to buy us or not? Like, how does it evolve?
So great question. So in the intro email, Yusuf did indicate that they were open to Acqui-Hire. So I knew it was a possibility, but it's not something that came up for the first couple of conversations. It was definitely more organic than that. And,
okay.
And as a result, I didn't go through like the traditional hiring process. I didn't do like a technical round or anything like that. Just a series of conversations after Jacob, who was their head of partnerships, talked to the chief of staff, talked to the AI team lead, talked to the CTO, and then the CEO. So, you know, felt very, very informal. I think I had maybe 9 or 10 conversations overall. And because they didn't have a standardized process for this, because who does, right? There was a time, I think call 6 maybe, where I was like, hey, like, are you guys going to buy us or not? Like, where is this going? Because I can't just be hired. I pulled the whole Jay-Z line of, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. And it just so happens that Jay-Z invested in Promise. Yeah, Rock Nation backs them. So that I literally said that line to them, and that went over very well. And I think they went back to the drawing board and were kind of like butting heads of like, okay, what do we do? And then I had a couple more rounds, and then I got the offer.
Was it just for you? Was it for the team? How did everyone else react?
Yeah, they ended up basically only wanting me. I did, you know, share a little bit of the exit with the team, of course, split by the equity, right? But ultimately, I think for them, they were looking for someone to build 0 to 1 product internally, open up new markets for them, beta test new initiatives. That's what they found really exciting about my profile, that they didn't think that they could replicate from a traditional hiring process. So I was happy to do it. Yeah. Who are you waving at?
Sorry, one thing that you'll notice when doing a podcast in a Zoox is people start taking pictures and people start waving at you from the outside.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you feel like a mini celebrity. Yeah, it was just some lady taking
and the Rolls Royce ceiling does that too, for sure.
Yeah. It really helps. And you'll see when the episode comes out, it's going to look very beautiful. It's going to look great.
Nice.
That's why we do it at night, by the way. When there's less glare from the sun, especially if it's in the afternoon, it comes straight through and the camera just messes it up. Traffic also sucks.
I'm sure you tried.
Yeah, during the day, it's just nighttime is perfect for this. Okay, cool. So the deal closes. How long are we talking here? Like from them deciding they'll acquire you to money is in, you're officially an employee of Promise?
About 2 months.
That's very quick.
Yeah.
That's fast.
Yeah, I think because, you know, they didn't have a whole lot of debt to buy. There wasn't we didn't have to go through a lot of the formalities of a larger acquisition, right? So it was fairly quick.
Did you feel relief? Were you sad? Like, what was going through your head?
Definitely mixed feelings. I'm very excited to join, a team of ex-Palantir and Google people that really know what they're doing, that were able to sell in a way that I wasn't. I'm really excited to learn. But of course, with any founder, the company is your baby, right? And I'd given up so much from a personal life perspective to build that company. And it just felt like, is this the right decision? And I think I still feel conflicted about it sometimes, right? But overall, it was definitely the right decision.
Got it. Okay. I think the perception is once you cross Series B as a company, you start becoming more corporate and, the startup life kind of disappears and becomes more boring. Was this your experience when you joined Promise? Was it just like working at a big tech company?
Promise is not like working at a big tech company. It's headcount hasn't hit 100 yet, but even for a company of like moderate size, it's very flat organizationally. So I get FaceTime with the C-suite all the time. I report to them, right? So I'm in this kind of unique role. Like I think you can definitely have a job there and have it feel more like a 9 to 5, but the role that they carved out for me is not like that.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. What's next for you? I feel like, founder red runs through your veins. I feel like you want to go out there, build some stuff and create businesses that last forever. Do you see yourself staying at Promise for the next 10 years or are you thinking of startup ideas, other ways to make an impact?
Yeah, I think I see myself staying at Promise for a decent amount of time, mostly just because I love the team. I love the impact of the work. Being able to help poor people get their benefits is just such a unique problem. And, we have access to 22 states. So like really unprecedented ability to leverage that impact and scale it up. So I see myself staying for a little while. So, I mean, I'm an inventive guy. I definitely have ideas. I've been seeing, people build new companies and sometimes I'll shake my head like that's not a great idea, right? And sometimes I'll be like, wow, like this is a great team. This is cool. Hopefully, best of luck, right?
Mm.
I don't think Dorsal was my last company. Other things that I've started dipping my toes into, I've thought about maybe going to the other side of the table and being a VC.
Oh yeah, I saw that on your LinkedIn.
Yeah. So I'm currently a VC fellow at Comma Capital, a fund based in New York. Shout out to Adarsh and David. So I've been doing that for a little over a month now.
What does a venture scout mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. So a venture scout is someone who helps investors basically, be your eyes and ears on the ground, figure out what teams that are in stealth mode are working on exciting things and refer them.
Are you given capital to invest in companies or like what's in it for you? Why are you?
No. At least for the role there are scouting programs where you can actually write checks and get some percentage of the carry. But the one at Comma Capital is more of a fellowship where they kind of introduce you to the world of venture and they teach you how to be an investor. So for me, like getting to work with the cohort that I'm a part of, super talented group of people, building up that network is a huge part of the value add for me. Getting to see companies from the other side of the table and get input into real live deals that are going on, super valuable experience for me, but definitely not the same as being the partner of a firm or anything like that.
That makes sense. You have at least, a little bit more idea of how a VC works by being a fellow here. And you've been on the pitching side as well. I feel like at least for me, and I'm sure for you as well, when you pitch, you're like, oh my God, investors are idiots. Or you have some kind of, distaste, dislike, straight up hate towards investors. Do certain decisions kind of make sense to you now that you've seen the other side, or are investors just like,
That's such a funny question. Yeah, I think definitely as founders, you can feel this kind of adversarial relationship, but I think a good investor is a partner for your growth, right? So no, I think I always understood why we would get, not yets or, I totally get it, right? The life cycle of a startup, 99% fail. Though a lot of the ones that don't fail, right? Like what is a meaningful exit? It's either getting acquired or going to IPO, right? Like there's nothing in the middle, right? Everything else is just death. So it's a really risky asset class. And as a result, I totally get why investors are the way they are. I also think that if you think that if your takeaway from a pitch is that investor wasn't very smart, you probably didn't do a good job of explaining what you're doing. Like these people are getting deals thrown at them constantly. You need to be able to go back to first principles and explain why you do what you do, who you are, why, like your right to win in the space. And if you can't say that succinctly, then you're probably not going to win, right? And the other possibility is it's simply not a fit. Right? There's literally thousands of different investment firms out there. Some of them will specialize in what you do. Some of them won't. Some of them you'll have chemistry with. Some of them you won't. Right. So I think, every meeting is signal. If your outtake is like investors are dumb, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. That makes sense. A lot of the times, I think investors are dumb, probably not the right investors for me. And there's investors that I admire that I'm like, why the hell didn't we meet last year? And they're all on our cap table now, which is awesome. Cool. Were you surrounded by a bunch of founders growing up?
Yeah. So my dad got laid off in 2008, and then he started a company right around then. So when I was in middle school, I would help, with the books or editing machine learning papers or doing pitch decks, redlining contracts with banks, the whole 9 yards. I was immersed in the startup culture very young. My dad used to build his company at a place called Plug and Play Tech Center in Sunnyvale, one of the original accelerators. This was before WeWork was a thing. And I would spend my summers there, instead of like doing like a sports camp or having fun like a normal kid. Like I was at a desk, in a accelerator. So I was immersed in startups from a very young age.
Got it. Yeah, I imagine that it kind of shapes you towards wanting to do big things and having an impact.
Well, in a way, it's actually kind of unintuitive, right? Like my mom just works a 9 to 5. She's a medical assistant, right? And I think she hated the idea of there being two founders in the same family, right? It's like, can someone work a steady job besides me, for God's sakes, right?
You have any siblings?
No, I'm an only child.
Damn.
Yeah.
Hell for your mom.
Yeah, hell for her. Yeah, I think there was a big part of like, yeah, this is what I've been exposed to from a young age. It's what I'm good at. It's what I know. But does that but I'm not my father, right? Like does that actually mean that it's the right play? And I think that, when my dad was my age, he wasn't starting a company. He was doing his master's and PhD, right? And now, like me, when I'm the age that my dad started a company, I'll probably just be working somewhere, right? And I might start a company later than him, or I might start another, like God knows what's going to happen, right? But everyone follows their own journey. So many talented people who have nothing to do with what their family business is. And I think, I wanted to be the same way for a long time, but, ultimately you can't control where things end up.
That makes sense. I feel like this is a great spot to end it. We have 3 minutes left.
Cool.
Yeah. Thanks for being on, man.